In this video, we will understand about what exactly is this AWS and why are we preferring this AWS in our learning journey. As I mentioned at the beginning of this course, throughout a learning journey, we will be performing the MLOps using the AWS. So it is very important that you understand what exactly is this AWS and the services that are available in the AWS. But before we go over there, you need to understand one of the basic concept that's called as the cloud computing. So as we proceed, this will give you the overall introduction to AWS and the key benefits of cloud computing. Now, when I talk about this AWS, that is the Amazon Web Services, so Amazon Web Services actually provide some of the broad set of services and the products, and this would include compute, storage, database, analytics, networking, mobile, developer tools, management tools, and many more on demand, available in seconds with pay as you go model. So this provides all the services that a company needs in a pay-as-you-go model. So as a result of this, this would enable the large or small enterprises or even startups, including small and medium-sized businesses and the customers in any domain, to quickly access the building blocks which they actually need in order to respond quickly to the changing business requirement. That is the overall intention of this Amazon Web Services. And this AWS was started around in the year of 2006. That is when the AWS, that is Amazon Web Services, started offering the IT infrastructure services to businesses as a web services, which is now known as the cloud computing. One of the key benefits of this cloud computing is the opportunity to replace the upfront capital infrastructure expenses with low variable cost which scales with your business. So as a result of this, with the help of this cloud, the business, they no longer need to plan for, or they no longer has to procure the servers and other IT infrastructures, like where they don't have to wait for weeks or months. They just have to go ahead and access it on the go within a matter of few seconds. So that's the benefit of this AWS, that is Amazon Web Services. Now that you have understood what exactly is this AWS, let us understand what is this cloud computing. So cloud computing is the on-demand delivery of compute power, database, storage, applications, and other IT resources through a cloud services platform via the internet with pay-as-you-go model. So it doesn't matter whether your application, which can share photos to millions of mobile users, or whether you're supporting the critical operations for the business. So this cloud service platform provides the excellent and the rapid access to flexible with low cost IT resources. So as a result of this, we don't have to plan or think about large upfront investment in the hardware. We don't have to worry about heavy lifting of managing the hardware as well. Instead, we just provision them, and we'll just specify what exactly is the type of resource that I want to have and the size of the computing resources that I want to have. And that's all. I can just get those resources in a matter of minutes, and I can start thinking and spending more time on building the solution rather than procuring the server. So that's the benefit of this cloud computing. And there are various cloud services platform that we have got. One such platform that we have got is Amazon Web Services. So Amazon Web Services owns and maintains the network connected hardware which is required for these application services when we provision and use it via web interface or with a web application. So that's the core idea about this cloud computing. Here, some of the major advantages that we would get when we are using this cloud computing is: one, we can trade fixed expenses for variable expense. So what it means is, instead of having to invest heavily in the data centers and the servers before we actually know whether we are going to use them or not, what we can do is we can simply play around when we consume the compute resources, and we only pay for the amount of resources that we consume. So this is going to reduce the overhead burden that we would have whenever we are working with the IT infrastructure. And we will have the benefit from massive economics of scale. So by using the cloud computing, we would achieve a lower variable cost than actually what we have to spend whenever we are doing something on our own. And this will help us in reducing the guessing the capacity. So we don't have to start or thinking about guessing on the infrastructure capacity. We can just access for the ones that we would require and paying only for the resources that we use. Increase the speed of agility. That means in a cloud computing, so new IT resources, if I want, it's just a matter of few minutes. Like if I just click on it, I'll get the IT resources in a matter of just few minutes. And the best part is we don't have to spend money on running and maintaining this infrastructure, that is the data centers. Everything will be managed by AWS itself. And with the amazing data centers that we have got from AWS, we can deploy the application in multiple regions around the world within a matter of few minutes at a minimal cost. Now, when we talk about cloud computing, there are majorly various types of cloud computing. Typically, we call it as three types of cloud computing models. So the first type of cloud computing model that we have got is the infrastructure as a service. Second one, we call it as the platform as a service. And the third type, we call it as software as a service. Here, when we talk about the infrastructure as a service, infrastructure as a service is a service which contains the basic building blocks for cloud IT and typically provides the access to the networking features, computers. So it could be virtual or on dedicated hardware. It will provide the data storage requirement. So this infrastructure as a service helps us with the highest level of flexibility and the management control over the IT resources that we have got whenever we are working. So this is the overall idea about this infrastructure as a service. Then we have something called as platform as a service. In this case of platform as a service, here this is going to remove the need for the organization to manage the underlying infrastructure. Usually it will be the hardware and the operating system, and it will help the organization to focus on the development and the management of our own application. So as a result of this will help us to be more efficient because we don't have to worry about the resource procurement, capacity planning, and the software maintenance, patching, and so on. All those heavy lifting will be done by the provider itself. Lastly, we have something called as software as a service. In the case of software as a service, here this provides us with the completed product which is run and managed by the service provider himself. In most cases, people referring to software as a service are actually referring to the end user application. Like to give you an example, Gmail. So Gmail, OneDrive. So these are all the example of the software as a service. Here, whenever you are using this SaaS products, so you don't have to worry about how the service is maintained or how the underlying infrastructure is managed. You just need to think about as how you will use that particular piece of software or an application. Okay, so Gmail, as I mentioned, it's one such example for software as a service. So these are the three common types of cloud computing models. And when we start working with the AWS, at least in our MLOps course, in majority of cases, we'll be using the infrastructure as a service, that is IaaS service, which will help us to get the required infrastructure from the AWS to run our computing jobs. Moving on, we have got the deployment models. So there are various deployment models that are available. So here, the first type of computing deployment model that we have got is a cloud. So a cloud-based application is fully deployed in the cloud, and I can say that all the parts of the application will run in the cloud. And these applications in the cloud have been created in the cloud, or this have been migrated from an existing infrastructure to take the advantage of the benefits of cloud computing. Now these cloud applications can be built on low-level infrastructure pieces, or even it can make use of high-level services which provide the abstraction from the management, architecting, and scaling the requirements of the entire infrastructure. Now, apart from cloud deployment model, we have something called as the hybrid deployment model. In case of hybrid deployment model, this is a way to connect the existing infrastructure, and it will help us to connect the infrastructure and the application between cloud-based resources and the existing resources which are not located in the cloud. So the most common method of hybrid deployment is between the cloud and the existing on-premise infrastructure in order to extend and grow an organization's infrastructure into the cloud while connecting the cloud resources to the internal system. And lastly, we have something called as on-premise deployment model. So in the case of on-premise deployment model, the deployment of the resources will be on premises using the virtualization and the resource management tools. And sometimes this is also known as the private cloud. Now, in case of on-premise deployment, it does not provide many benefits of the cloud computing, but sometimes this is something what organizations will look for whenever the organization requires the dedicated resources. Okay, in most of the cases, this deployment model is same as the legacy IT infrastructure. While using the application management and the virtualization technologies, you try and increase the resource utilization. So that's the overall idea about this on-premise infrastructure. Now, when we talk about AWS, so AWS has the global infrastructure. The AWS cloud infrastructure is actually built around the AWS region and the availability zone. So these region and the availability zone is what you hear me talking about as and when we are working in the hands-on learning journey. When I say AWS region is a physical location in the world where we have multiple availability zones. And these availability zone consist of one or more discrete data centers, each with redundant power, networking and connectivity, which is housed in separate facilities. And these availability zones help us with the ability to operate production applications and the databases that are more highly available, fault tolerant and scalable than would be possible from a single data center. So that's the overall idea about this global infrastructure, which means when we are making use of the AWS resources, we are getting the advantage of the data centers that has been built around the world from the AWS. So this increases the security and the compliance requirements of the organization. So it will help us to keep the data safe with the AWS infrastructure, and we'll be able to meet the compliance requirement because AWS manages dozens of compliance programs in its infrastructure. With the cloud computing, it will help us in reducing the cost and it will help us to scale quickly with the cloud storage. So these are all the advantages that we have got whenever we are working with this AWS cloud storage. Okay, now with this we come to the end of this video. I hope you now know as what is cloud computing and why we are using the AWS. In the next video, let's have a look into the technical stack of AWS for MLOps and machine learning. So I'll see you in the next video.